Hello? No. Really? $15 million? Because I sampled the percussion from the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse theme? Well, what are they gonna do? I'm just gonna destroy the evidence.
You wanna come inside my clubhouse?
Is sampling theft? And how to get away with it? Well, it kinda is, right? It depends on the situation, if you have the license for the sample, but in general, if you sample something without permission, it is, copyright infringement. But no one's going to get you if you're just some bedroom producer sampling things for fun. Especially if it doesn't pop off, if you don't really get traction on it. I wouldn't worry about it. Just send it and see how it goes. And if you get to the point where you're getting DMCA letters, maybe you're in a good spot. So in this video, I want to discuss some strategies that you can use to maybe get away with some sampling in your production. But I don't really want to directly teach you how to steal anything. So first I'm going to give you some examples of what not to do before we get into the real meat and potatoes of things. So I want to start off with some examples of artists who have sampled things without licensing them first, and what happened in their mainstream success. Because again, if you're an independent artist and you're just doing things on the down low, you're making beats for your friends, you're making beats for underground rap, that's the game, make something and sample it well enough that you can't really distinguish it from the original song, okay? Because if you don't do that and you do find success, you're gonna get in trouble like these people. I want to talk about is very recent, and this is much more relevant to anyone that may be watching this video that may be an independent producer or an independent artist that's trying to use samples. And it's Juice WRLD's Lucid Dreams. It samples a Sting song called The Shape of My Heart, and it's like the guitar line ripped straight from it and put into the song. And that song may have been recorded before Juice WRLD was extremely popular, but Sting owns 85% of the royalties of the song. Okay, and that's a lot. Okay, so say you made this song in your bedroom and it used a sample of some pretty famous song and you weren't expecting anything to happen. Well, then 85% of any potential earnings taken right there, right off the bat. The last song I want to bring up here is a Nicki Minaj song called Sorry, and this song to me got really fucked up because this is what happened. So she possibly, or her producer possibly, used a Tracy Chapman sample completely without their permission. And then after the song was produced, they asked for permission to use it, and Tracy Chapman said no. And then the song got leaked anyways on a radio show and online, and Tracy Chapman successfully sued Nicki Minaj for $450,000. And then the song wasn't even released because she couldn't release it officially because she sued her for $450,000 and then didn't even get the license out of it, right? And Nicki Minaj is on a much bigger level, but you'd think an artist of that size and of that level of fame and what probably wealth could pay for a sample. But artists like us, artists like me, artists that may potentially be watching this video, you're not going to get sued for $450,000 unless you really blow up. And then in that case, you're probably doing well enough that it's not that big of a deal. So let's see what you can do now to get away with it. So now I want to go through some actual specific sampling methods that you can use, going from some easier ones to more complicated things that might take some work to sound good. So right off the bat, the very first thing that you should be trying out is just pitch shifting samples down, right? And in Ableton, it's super easy. You just double click on the sample and shift it down. And I like to start out with -12, maybe -7 or -5, depending on how much you want to move it around, but just mess around with things and see what sounds good. And here, I do want to show you the original sample first, actually. This is just a vocal thing that I found on Splice. Right? Okay, and then this is it pitch shifted down. So already, changing the vibe a little bit. And one of the things about Ableton I really like is that if you go to the warp mode and put it on Complex Pro, You can mess around with the formants to really change the feeling of the voice. And if you're lowering vocals, a tip I'll give you right here that saves some space in your mix is to throw a little EQ on there. I even like just using an EQ3 and cutting off all the lows on the sample. And that'll make it to where it's only the mids and highs in the sample, but it gives more space for your bass, right? Because like I have this here. You know what I'm saying? But okay, so that's pitch shifting down. So what else can you do besides pitch shifting? So from here, one of the things I would like to do is to break it up into slices so that you can move things around and chop things up. And you can either do that by hand, but I'm lazy, and one of the things I like to do is this slice to new MIDI track, okay? And before you want to do that though, you want to freeze and flatten the sample, because right now it's got these effects on it that are lowering it, and you want it to sound exactly like how it sounds now before we slice it to MIDI. And what slicing to MIDI does, while I'll explain while it's doing this, is slicing to MIDI takes everything and chops it up on beat and spreads it out over a MIDI piano roll, right? So if you had a keyboard, like a MIDI keyboard or something to use as well as this chopped sample, you could actually play it on the keys, and I don't have one set up right. I don't have one set up right now, but you could do that with this. Beep beep boop beep boop beep boop beep beep boop beep boop beep boop. It's almost there. And so once this is freeze and flattened, I'll do the next one, and this might take a second to load, but I'm going to slice it to MIDI, slice to new MIDI track, and I'm gonna go with every quarter note, but this will take a second as well, and we're gonna listen to this here for a second, because if you take a look at the piano roll, how it's laid out, every note on the piano roll is a little slice of the sample. Right? So what I can do now is go make a new track and just throw some things down, and it might sound interesting. And this is where you'd want to really mess around with this for a while to get something you felt like sounded cool. But sometimes just right off the bat it does. Let's see. See? You know, and so you can just get something going real quickly like that, and you don't have to do all the slices manually. So, in another way, you could use a conversion tool in Ableton, and this is one I like to use pretty often, especially with like more, like, so example, this drum track here. This is a sample I got, right? But let's say you like the rhythm but wanted to change out the notes and everything. You could take this and convert drums to a new MIDI track. But let's hear how that sounds. And now I could go through and change these out with actual samples that I like, right? Now I want to show you some other things I do here with this SP404, and this is a sampling effects drum machine, groove box. It's got all kinds of features on it, but what I really love about it is that it's got a bunch of filters and DJ FX and loopers, and so like I've got this playing here, right? You can just do all kinds of things with it on the fly, right? Without having to really mess with a bunch of knobs or buttons or anything like that. So what I'm going to do here is with my right hand, Control Ableton, and I have this going, and now I've got the effects on the SP. I messed it up, but you know, you can mess around with things, right? So this is a little piece of hardware that you would have to add to the laptop. but it has so much capabilities inside of it that if you use this on top of sampling in your laptop and add all these layers like I was talking about, you can add all sorts of things to your song. It'll change up the sample and change things away from what it was originally. So with songs like Espresso by Sabrina Carpenter going platinum off of Splice loops, you can get away with sampling off of products like Splice or Arcade or sample libraries where you do pay for samples. And I want to throw this out there right out the bat, because if you go through one of these services, you automatically have a license for anything you could use, right? And if you already have the license and you sample it and the song goes off, then no one's going to get in trouble. You can make your money and you'll be fine. And personally, I love Splice. I use a lot of Splice samples in my music, and I really recommend finding a sample library like that. If you get Splice, you can use that and not have to worry about sample licensing. But if you do want to like sample records or sample songs you've heard on the radio or stuff like that, there's a variety of things you can do that may help you go under the radar. And this honestly doesn't work as well with very popular songs, because you want to obscure a sample as much as you can so that it's unrecognizable. And that's harder to do with something that's more well known, right? But if you find, some really, really niche and vintage song that you can flip into something really cool and different, maybe no one will ever notice. Especially with records, you can really find a lot, right? Going crate digging and going to record stores, and even if you can't afford actual record stores because they're kind of expensive, there's places like Half Price Books that have records and stuff like that. If you really go and find cool old music to transform into your own thing, maybe no one will notice. And some of the things you can do to transform things immediately, right? Like some of the biggest things are like chopping and screwing, slowing stuff down and chopping it up, moving things around, transposing things, granular synthesis, or even putting samples on a keyboard and playing them, or putting them on a hardware pad and playing them out, and creating something else, then shifting that down and resampling it. I love resampling, and resampling is where you take one thing that you've sampled in a way and then change it up again and redo the whole process again, or do a different sampling technique on it and change it up just another layer, another layer, another layer, and keep doing things to it that transform it into something that may not even be recognizable in the first place. One place you can look for inspiration for this is like electronic music, and a lot of the music is very difficult to listen to, but like Aphex Twin or Death Grips use a lot of really interesting sampling techniques or effects to get very interesting sounds out of their recordings. And especially as like a hip hop producer, if you can take little bits of that sound and that sampling techniques, you can change things up a lot in your own production. And everyone samples, some of my favorite hip hop samplers are like Knowledge is a great person to look to if you love like R&B stuff, if you like more low-key vibes, or I really like the Alchemist. He's got all kinds of very nice sampled beats. So again, as an independent musician, do you really need to clear samples? If you've got the money for it, go for it. But if you use something and you're just using it for fun and using it to post on SoundCloud and you're not too worried about getting too many views on it, don't worry about it. Sample, experiment, try new things, take old things and make them into something new. But if you're a more serious artist and you're afraid of getting into licensing issues by using samples that are still, public domain or relatively known, look at something like Splice or Arcade or even free sample libraries, and you'll find a lot of things that you can use that you'll be surprised at what you can do with them. If you enjoyed the video, please give me a like and subscribe, or even drop me a comment telling me how you sample and what techniques you use to change samples up.